come round for a cuppa, Liz.
Okay, wait, hold on.
What?
To the listeners, because they can't see this, Brace just sat up straight in posture that I didn't even know you were capable of.
Mm.
Held up a pantomime teacup, took a sip, paused, and then said, "What did you say?"
Have a cuppa?
I don't think that's a thing.
No, it's a thing. Oh, you're wrong. Wait. Now, no, it's a thing. You're wrong, Liz. It is now, despite the way I talk and my lifestyle and the things that I represent, now you look like the big fool up. Do they say things like
No,
fool?
it's Australian now.
No. First of all, that is literally part of the UK. It is part of the United Kingdom. If it's not part of the UK, then how come the Queen's in charge? You ever think about that? Which technically would make this podcast part of the UK because the Queen's in charge here too.
That's right.
Not you.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Come here. Jeffrey Epstein.
Hello, Brace.
Lights, camera, TrueAnon.
No.
That's how we're opening every episode from now. I don't have to do more of my I'm not a goddamn baboon doing impression.
Yeah, you're a little monkey. You're the little monkey man.
I don't. Yeah. I guess I'll take that. Yeah, or I'm grinding. I'm certainly grinding an organ right now.
Rise and grind, monkey man. That's my new character. Rise and grind, monkey man.
Okay, just like a guy who's like really dedicated.
He's like half monkey, half man, and he's all about the rise and grind.
That's what you were thinking? Not just a hardworking
this is my new
monkey?
character. No. The name was cute, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to tease out the character.
But that's horrifying.
So it's a half monkey, half man. Every morning he goes in, right up on the crypto exchanges. Rise and grind, baby.
What does he look like? I mean, that's a terrifying sort of image.
No. Why would it be terrifying?
I mean, well, monkeys already are a type of man.
So he's double man.
I don't like that whatsoever. My name is Bryce.
Awful. My name is Liz. Hello, everyone.
Me produces Young Chomsky.
This is TrueAnon. Welcome.
I'm gonna speak in Cockney rhyming slang for this.
No, you're not, because that's not what you're doing.
Bush knocked down the towers.
What?
No, I was a rap.
You just have Tourette's, but it's you just saying like 9/11 things.
He did do. I mean, it's a song. We you know what? This is fucked up that I just did like several minutes. Well, I guess I did Australian accent. We have a British guest.
Yes.
And he's gonna listen to this and he's gonna be like, these guys are assholes.
No, he'll probably think it's funny.
He has such a charming accent.
I love him so much.
Yeah, he's great.
We have I think big fan favorite, Tom Fowler, back on the show, talking to us about the UK Spycops case, which is what he was on the show previously to talk about, but now we got updates.
And
we got updates that the lie and fake news media from both here and across the pond won't cover. They won't cover it.
I do want to say a little director's commentary here. When the word tranche or tranche rather is mentioned, Liz's face lit up. she went like this. Well, I guess you can't see it when I'm doing it either. But I'm going to put my face really close to this high-end space age microphone I'm using and see if you can hear my skin crinkle. You hear that?
Because you're so moist.
Yeah. Well, I put on a lot. Oh my God. I put on a lot of stuff this morning.
All your serums.
Oh.
Here's the thing.
Oh, baby.
Tranche is like our thing.
Yeah, we love tranches.
We always say that on the show.
Oh, we love it.
No? Okay, let's not even say any of that because Brace has forgotten that we always make a face or a joke when we say tranche. And now you're pretending like you don't remember.
I was that was the point of the thing that I said.
Well, now you're acting strange.
Okay. Liz, I'm not going to say it, but for those, I'm not going to say it. I know. So right now, here's the thing, listeners. Liz is trying to get me to say that they, them pussy got me acting strange. I'm not going to, so I'm not saying it there. I'm just saying what she wants me to say.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to say it.
This
you know
is
what?
such a cop out.
No, it's not. Did you not want me to say that? You wanted me to say, you're literally gaslighting me right now.
Oh my God.
You're
You're such a little bully. You got bully brain.
Yes, I am. Being a bully is cool.
Don't bully me. You don't bully your teammate.
I'm bullying you right now.
Yeah, you're breaking the bully rules.
Bully time starts now. Roll the interview. That they didn't pussy really do got me acting strange though. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest for you. One of my favorite guests, finally returning, Tom Fowler, now of the Spycops Info podcast, which I have listened to and it's fantastic. We did a previous episode with him on the Spycops inquiry, and actually, really just about the whole Spycops scandal. But we the second sort of round of inquiries have been completed. In the UK, and now we have him back. And Tom, for those of our listeners who maybe didn't listen to the last episode, can you give us kind of like a general sum up of what the fuck is going on with this?
Sure, man. So I guess 10 years ago now, we discovered that there was a network of undercover police officers who'd been targeting political protest groups. Before long, we kind of found out that they had been going back to the units were formed in 1968. And there was at least 10 undercover officers at any given time on 4 to 5 year deployments throughout left-wing environmentalists, animal rights, progressive causes of various types. After it kind of came out that they'd infiltrated things like the Stephen Lawrence Family Justice Campaign and other high profile things, and that they'd these undercover officers fathered children and done loads of other fucking really bad shit, man. They'd done loads of really bad shit. There was a bit of a fuss, and thanks to some internal disagreements between the then Home Secretary and the police, a public inquiry was called in 2015. It only started last year in November. But yeah, it's been starting from 68 and kind of going through the various undercover officers and kind of picking apart their deployments, I guess, to a certain extent. I mean, it's been kind of limited in a lot of ways in what it's looked at, but it's the first time we've really got a glimpse of these secret units and how they targeted the left. Yeah, so this was the second phase. This looked at 1973 to 84. So it was a quite explosive time in British political history, and it's been fascinating. Yeah.
And you've been following it because you have a personal connection with the entire history here. Yeah,
so I was a member of South Wales Anarchists. During the 2000s, we were infiltrated by an undercover officer who used the name Marco Jacobs. He was with I hung around with him a great deal for 4 or 5 years. We were kind of busy mates sort of thing. He disappeared. I was quite lucky in compared to a lot of other people who infiltrated. We found out quite quickly that he was an undercover cop within a year or two. A lot of other people spent 20 years kind of thinking that somebody in their group had been an undercover cop. So, I was one of when people may have heard there was a number of women who'd been deceived into long-term intimate sexual relationships with undercover officers, brought cases against the police, not against the individual officers, against the police. And there was 11 women and 1 man, and I was the 1 man. So I started kind of bringing going to court a lot. So I started because the coverage of this topic generally in the media has been very limited. Yeah. I've ended up kind of using social media to cover it as much as I can, really.
Yeah, I've noticed too a lot of the coverage. I think, rightly so. The sexual relationships that these cops entered into with women are it's appalling, right? Anybody who hears about it is that is a horrible, fucked up tactic. But that seems to be what a lot of the coverage revolves around, because it's not obviously it's shocking and stuff, but it's also salacious, right? You got a little bit of sex in there and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, man! Fucking the tabloids love the sex, don't they, man? So
Yeah.
like, yeah, that was definitely been like the majority of the media coverage. Also because like that was the big thing that came in out at first, and because the police spun it as like a rogue officer and then a rogue unit, it was like, oh, this was like this thing that went on that shouldn't have, and then the media, like, kind of, there was a lot of coverage at the beginning about that, and then like editors are like, well, we've covered that. Well, since then we found out so much more, so much information has kind of dripped out that like we realized, yeah, it's not a rogue officer, it's not a rogue unit.
No.
This was not like accidental. This is systemic, right? The whole thing's systemic. It goes back a long way. They had tradecraft manuals on this shit. And like that kind of, but like I think for a lot of reporters, they kind of pitch that to their editors, and the editors go, well, we covered this like 8 years ago, and it was about the sex and stuff, so we're just not covering it anymore. I think that's part of the problem, amongst other things,
Yeah, I mean, another thing too is that like this inquiry. So I mean, for those who haven't picked up on it yet, there is this inquiry going on out there, which is an official government inquiry. But it's also taking fucking forever. I mean, I was reading an interview with I can't remember what a victim from I believe a woman who was in one of these relationships in the 90s, and she's like, like, I've been going, but my I'm not going to be able to give evidence until 2024. And I mean, like we talked about last time we interviewed, this has been delayed and delayed and delayed. But they finally did these 4 rounds of inquiry. I guess 4 weeks. I don't know if 4 rounds is necessarily the way to describe it.
Yeah. So we had like 2 weeks about November, and then it was 3.5 weeks just now. But then they just announced, just when this one started, that the next round, which was meant to be this November, is being put back to next year at some point next year. They don't even say when. And then also that the next phase after that will be a year later again. So tranche 2. So we're still on tranche 1. We've just done phase 2. There's like numerous phases to each tranche.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're probably 2024. I think is a bit. That was Lisa who said that. She had, and she was saying, that 2024. I think she was being optimistic personally. I think like. There's a possibility that it'll never finish this inquiry, that it'll just get like mothballed. But as we get closer to like the present day, because like the police have been dragging their heels.
Of course.
One of the big reasons for the delays is the police asking for anonymity orders, putting in judicial reviews, doing everything they can to slow down the process. Obviously, they've got the documents and they've got to release the documents. So like they've dragged their heels on every step of that, on the redactions. So like, I mean, that's what they've done for like the early 70s. Like, how do you think they're going to get to when it's like 10 years ago, man? It's,
I know. It's like you're going to get to like the 2000s in like 10 years or something.
Exactly.
I was going to say, like, the first chair has already died. We're on the second chairman of the inquiry already. Like, I mean, if he dies...
Wait, the first chairman of the inquiry died?
Yeah. Lord Justice Pitchford was the original chair of the inquiry. Like, he wasn't that old, but yeah. I mean, this guy's older, I think, but yeah.
I got to say, too, as an outside observer to the UK judicial system, I knew they wore the funky little robes and the little hair, but there is a picture of, I can't remember who it is, but in the first like coverage of the week on that website, what's the URL?
The campaign opposing police surveillance.com.
There we go.
Snappy, that's us.
But there is a picture of one of, I believe, a magistrate in it, but the man is
so no, he's not a magistrate. He's a judge.
Yeah.
He's the chair. It's Sir John Mitting is his name.
Well, he looks like goddamn Santa Claus, except not jolly whatsoever. The red is a truly dignified color for a robe.
Yeah, it's very funny looking. No offense.
But so we're talking about 72 to 84. You said in this. And
yeah.
Famously so, in Britain, those years were dominated by the far right, at least later, the 80s. I mean, by the emergence of the National Front.
In 1977, the National Front came third in the popular vote in the general election. They didn't win any seats. They won some council seats. Isle of Dogs was a famous one, but like. They were like replacing the Liberals as like the third biggest party in British politics. Now, I mean, Thatcher came on along in '79 and like stole all the policies.
Right.
Well, not all the policies, but like, a lot of the policies. And they also like the shtick, like, they didn't have to see the exact policies, but people knew what, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, dog whistle kind of shit. But yeah, like they really, really were on the rise. And, at the same time as they were like kind of presenting this political force, they were also on the streets in a really big way. Certain parts of Britain, which were like kind of, they were doing marches through multicultural areas. There was all these little splinter groups. Like one of them we heard about at the inquiry was the Dagenham Axe Clan with a K, that would go around and throw like axes through the windows of like they're in Dagenham, which at the time was a very white area. Yeah. So like, they didn't have many people to go for, but they found like some mixed race woman who had a Jewish husband, and things like that was quite common at the time. Like there was a lot of it happening in the UK. So, a lot, as you'd imagine, the left's biggest kind of thing at the time was anti-fascism, right? Like that was, and so you had these really big demonstrations. Like last time I was on, we talked a lot about the anti-Vietnam War movement, and like that was the original sort of group that was targeted after '68. The big riot in Grosvenor Square outside the US Embassy, but. The next big thing that happened was the anti-apartheid movement, and that was the next big thing they targeted, which was solidarity with Black South Africa, opposing the apartheid regime in South Africa. And there was a thing called the Stop the 70 tour, where a cricket team, cricket's really big in England, you may have heard of it. And like it's also in South Africa, and there was a tour planned, and there was like a campaign to like kind of people running on the pitch, stopping these games happening. And this was kind of, this became sort of like the number one target for the undercover police after they'd kind of decided that they'd kind of done. They hadn't completely done it, but they'd kind of finished with the Vietnam Solidarity campaign. And there was actually, interestingly, that we heard a bit about the Palestine Solidarity campaign, which started around then. They kind of infiltrated that right from the get-go as well.
Yeah, I read it. They started like right in '67. They sent undercover officers in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one of the things which I think last time I was on, I didn't really sort of underline enough, is that like these undercover officers that we're talking about, when we talk about like the Spycops, Special Demonstration Squad, the National Public Order Intelligence Unit, these are like full deep cover undercover officers, right? And they were recruited from like the C-section of Special Branch, which are like already political police who used to turn up to demonstrations and meetings in plain clothes. Now, for me, for a long time as an activist when I was younger, I kind of thought that's what undercover police were, right? They were these guys who turned up to meetings and protests in plain clothes. But like to the police, that's not undercover officers. That's plainclothes officers, right? So like a lot of before these units were formed, like they were recruiting quite heavily from people who'd done that kind of work. And like a lot of the undercover officers we heard evidence from at this stage of the inquiry, they said, I'd been in C-section for years. I already was familiar with the targets. I was already familiar with the networks or whatever. I was just going into them now, like properly.
So what were some of the groups that they targeted? I mean, let's start kind of with the early 70s. I noticed that Socialist Workers Party comes up a lot, and that was less so now, but certainly was a pretty big group in the 70s in the UK.
Right.
I mean, Trotskyism and the UK has always had let's say a special relationship, but they seem to have like a lot of front groups, which the special branch, or rather, excuse me, the SDS infiltrated heavily. I mean, I'm talking about some of the stuff that I was reading in here. I mean, they were the granular level of detail that they were taking from these groups and writing up reports on. I mean, we're talking lists of who's babysitting whose kids with pictures of the kids in these sort of reports. And so, like, what actual like groups were they really like kind of going after here?
So at the time, the Socialist Worker Party was originally called the International Socialists. They changed their name to improve paper sales because the paper was called the Socialist Worker. And I mean, like anybody in the UK who's familiar will know that like the SWP is all about paper sales. Which is really interesting, actually. When we heard from Paul Cray, one of the undercover officers, he was still kind of a bit hung up on the paper selling thing. You could hear it in him. He was like kind of and then we do this and that, and hopefully we'd sell lots of copies of Socialist Worker. And like it was put to him that he wasn't a very good seller.
Yeah, well, that's the most important thing. I mean, that's you could say that is actually like a pretty important way to strike back at the spy cops, is doing the classic Trotskyist tactic of you have to sell this newspaper every day for some reason.
Right. Yeah. But like, I mean, like when we talk about, so like there was the anti-apartheid movement was literally the name of the thing, and the Stop the 70 tour was like the original enemy. But then the next big one was like obviously Ireland was like a really big, I mean, obviously Ireland is still a big issue in British politics, but like in the early 70s, where a group called the Troops Out movement started, which was like an unaffiliated to Irish republicanism campaign. It was very much set itself as like kind of a non-sectarian, like bring the troops home. Don't have the troops on the ground in Northern Ireland.
We love our squaddies. We want them back.
like-
I shouldn't do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I think there was definitely an attempt by maybe a slightly cynical attempt by those on the left to try and to tap into like kind of that. So it was like very broad based. Lots of like vicars and fucking politicians involved. But like Rick Gibson, who was one of the undercover officers, he was one of the ones who like really like learned how to use like having sexual relationships with people in order to get himself like up the levels of the organization. I mean, he ended up as national convener of the organization. I mean, like there's there was later another undercover officer that ended up on the central committee, like, and not for like a short period, like 18 months. He was national. I mean, this is not like some sort of, he's not like in the group. He's like running the national network, the national kind of campaign, like the whole thing. So like, I think one of the reasons why the police really like kind of infiltrated the International Socialists and the Socialist Worker Party, which was their successor, so deeply is partially because it was possible to do that. Like kind of, there's lots of elected positions. I mean, like, the people who infiltrated the anarchists, the best they could do was hang around Freedom Press a lot and like kind of hope to bump into people and become buddies with people and shit to like kind of work their way up. Whereas in the SWP, so Rick Gibson, there wasn't a branch in the area that he was set to. So he contacted someone, Rich Chessman, to like set up a branch. And he contacted the National, he was like, we need a branch in this area. Then he became the rep for that branch. And then he got the rep for that branch to become like rep for the region. And then he became rep for London, and he kind of moved his way up through the ranks. Just sort of like kind of creating. We had a few examples of that. I mean, particularly with the Maoists. Like there was one which was like one of the undercovers started his own faction with like members of other Maoist groups, like who had been expelled, and they started this, and they produced like one pamphlet that was denouncing all the other Maoist groups. I got to be honest. It's been an education for me, and like kind of like I'm an anarchist, right? So like my history, like I kind of know the anarchist stuff, and I read all the old anarchy magazines. We heard about Albert Meltzer and like Stuart Christie quite a lot.
Oh yeah,
things. These are like kind of
big fan,
big
of
names
here.
in British anarchism. Man, Stuart Christie, anarchist granddad, man. Like, I mean, it's really sad that he died last year. For a long time at the Anarchist Book Fair in London, it was like one of those people you'd be like, kind of, oh, hello, Mr. Christie. It was kind of exciting to meet. But I used
a lot of his work on this show. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool, man. Yeah. Towards the Citizens Militia, yeah. But like he, but like in terms of like the Maoist stuff, I had no idea. Like, I didn't realize like so much of that stuff, and it was quite interesting to kind of. They're quite small groups, but I mean they were heavily infiltrated, like everybody else was. Though the cops who did that, like that was like a really bum deal. Lots of the other cops were like, "I couldn't have done that. Couldn't have infiltrated those. It was too much reading, too much like too involved, and like." And then men were always getting told off, for being misogynist,
Well, we had here in America, actually, one of the sort of like, there was a group, a Maoist group started entirely and staffed entirely by the FBI. Actually, we interviewed an author. Not about the book he wrote about that, but there's a book called, I believe, Heavy Radicals, which is about just FBI infiltration of Maoist groups in the 70s. And they started their own and started sending out. I mean, there was no actual group that you could join, but they sent out newsletters to different people and like, presented themselves as like a Maoist branch of the Communist Party USA. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of times, unfortunately, as a Maoist, most Maoist groups do have somewhere where you can count the guys on your fingers. But yeah, I saw that. I mean, and these officers too would go from group to group to group as well.
I mean, I think like the thing with like the office, like what we found out was that early on, like officers could kind of do what they wanted. They were like, we need someone in this part of London, so like go and join whatever's happening in that area. And like, but they were given a lot of leeway. Like I say, like Rick Gibson started up his own group in that area. Like other people, like like say Vince Miller, who we heard quite a lot about because he had a relationship with a woman who gave evidence, Madeline. He was in Walthamstow, and like, I mean, the amount of information he had about people who'd like bought copies of Socialist Worker in Walthamstow. It wasn't just like people who like turned up to demonstrations or members of the party. It was like people who turned up to one meeting, like like public meetings about one topic, like some local issue maybe, or like people who just regularly bought the paper. I mean, we heard from like Paul Gray about like, just some 15-year-old lad who'd like had a problem with racists in his school, who'd like, kind of talked to like gone to SWP paper sales to get in the face of the National Front. And I mean, like, he'd had a registry file opened on him at like 15. He's being spied on from an early age. I mean, like, so the registry files are like they're the MI5 files, which like the special branch have access to. So they're like the kind of the bit of the security services, as opposed to the plod, the police, that are like kind of go between the two. So like having a registry file on you is like, that's your card marked, son. And like the people getting these registry files on them for like very little.
You started earlier, you were saying about the difference between plainclothes and deep cover, like that kind of the perception being that they're like, we kind of understood, but the slow drip of information that's coming out is that, in order for them to infiltrate and be kind of able to infiltrate all these different groups, it's like a totally different level of intelligence that these, like, intelligence level training that these guys are working with. I think that's that was really surprising to me reading all of this stuff, because I think I was like you, it's like, oh, I think I understand how this works. It's like everyone thinks, oh, he's a cop, oh, he's a Fed, but it's like a totally different level of training even involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like one of the things which I think is really kind of like the most shocking. I mean, like, fucking hell, there's so much shocking shit. But like one of the things that really kind of is how much they use trauma, right? So a lot of people who were infiltrated had, like certain traumatic things that happened in their lives. And we see those like echoing in like later deployments. Like undercover cops have picked it up as like, oh, this is a good like little. So then it turns up as like they've always like, their parents are always dead. They've been fostered or adopted. There's like, the breakup of a relationship is like there's certain sort of like kind of hallmarks that a lot of the undercover officers had, which they built up from like kind of studying the lives of activists and what activists are like. And if you look through like the tradecraft manual, you're seeing like kind of, these kind of, this group, they're like this, they've got these sort of, and a lot of it like kind of cartoonish and like bullshit, but a lot of it is like kind of, ooh, I feel seen, you know what I mean? So yeah, there's definitely like a lot more there's a lot more in it than like even, like particularly like when we heard about like kind of the level to which like, it's because it's not just like, when I say, oh, if you bought copies of Socialist Worker in Walthamstow in the late 70s, you were on a list. It wasn't just your name. It was your address, your job, if you're a member of a trade union, how much you earned, who you lived with, what you looked like, what the people you lived with looked like, what they did for a job, if they were members of a trade union, where they went on to move to next. I mean, we had some files where like kind of has not been involved in radical politics for 3 years. And that's the opening line, about this person, right? So, I mean, like, it's just literally like kind of, I mean, one of the interesting ones. So, like, Lord Peter Hain was one of the people who gave evidence, who was targeted quite a lot because he'd been very involved in the anti-apartheid movement. I mean, he was being spied on in 2003, where he was described in an undercover police report as a South African terrorist. Now, at the time, he was a member of the British cabinet, Blair's cabinet, right? They've just gone to fucking war with Iraq. He was Welsh secretary. He was father of the House of Commons. Like, I mean, admittedly, he was a Labour Party politician, right? And you can never truly join the establishment in this country unless you're. I mean, like, it was a Labour government, but it's like the Conservative Party is their state, right? Britain is their state. They right. Like they're always in charge, really. So, like, I guess he was never fully, in this country, you can't. You'll still be spied on, like, unless you're a Tory, because we haven't found any Tories yet, but
Oh no, and that sort of brings me. I mean, speaking of Tories and their, sort of their little step cousins, or I would say step brothers in the National Front. I mean, you talked about earlier, the National Front starts in 1977, right? And I think that, like, I mean,
oh, no, so it didn't start then, but that's its high watermark.
Oh, okay, yeah. But
so I forget the year it starts. I think it starts at like late 60s. But it's small at first, but it really grows to like being the national party of British fascism by 77. And that election stands a lot of candidates.
That's also, I mean, it sort of coincides with the rise of just the skinhead movement. I don't know what you want to call it in the UK. And a lot of, like,
I would say on the skinhead thing, like, I mean, so I mean, no, you're kind of right. You're kind of right. I mean, like, but the skinhead movement's bigger than that. I mean, like, you know, there was a lot of skinheads who were joining left-wing groups involved in anti-fascist organising at the time. You know what I mean?
No, I'm familiar.
It's a two-sided kind of thing. Yeah. Well, I live in South Wales, so like the local like skinheads around here, like the oppressed, who are like kind of very much. like we'll never let you like mention skinheads without bringing this fact up. So but
I'm a rocker, baby. I know. I'm familiar. I had all the Cockney Rejects records. I got the Impressed record. Also, unfortunately, had the Combat 84 record, but I didn't know about them back then. But there was a huge surge in far right violence just on the streets of England. I mean, that is like, without a doubt. I think maybe Americans might know that. I mean, you might just know about it. But there was that what was that? This Is England movie that came out that sort of showcased that pretty well. But what's sort of astounding is that the only case of SDS infiltration of far right groups that I'm familiar with in this comes from a member, a cop, joining the Socialist Workers' Party, I believe, and the Socialist Workers' Party,
Workers' Revolutionary Party,
Workers' Revolutionary Party, and the Workers' Revolutionary Party having them go undercover to join. I don't know exactly which group it was, but
so it was Liga St. George. I mean, he was infiltrating like basically the local branch of the National Front, but it was Liga St. George was there he went back to his superiors and went, oh, these guys seem pretty serious. Maybe we should infiltrate these. They were like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it, son. Don't worry about that. At all. And I think it really feeds into this thing we see a lot, of like kind of, I don't know about the US, but I guess it probably is the case same over there. But in the UK, there's this kind of feeling that whilst like left-wing politics is like sedition, like working for foreign governments, kind of trying to overthrow society, that like extreme racism and fascism are like legitimate white working class concerns. We saw it much more recently with the rise of the English Defence League, like 10 years ago, where we had like senior police officers saying that the Muslim group should engage with the legitimate concerns of the English Defence League. It's like, there's this kind of this thing that like, for the establishment, the far right are they're useful, right? They're like kind of and I think this is so much about what the point of these undercover deployments was, because it was about fighting social attitudes. And like obviously they didn't need to fight those social attitudes. I mean, those social attitudes like really fitted into their own agenda. So like, why would you want to like dampen them down?
Right.
So yes, there was none into the far right, but the anti-fascists, I mean, boy, did they get fucking infiltrated in a big way. In a seriously big way. I mean,
because there was a really big anti-fascist movement in the UK in the 70s and 80s. I mean, there was obviously Searchlight magazine, all that kind of stuff. But this tactic of even having members go undercover into right-wing groups was like actually a surprisingly pretty common one, which I see a lot in the UK. Not sure how much that happened in the US, but also the US, our far right sort of manifested itself into militia movements, which were. Well, the FBI had a lot of engagement with them, which culminated in the Oklahoma City bombing, which the FBI did. But it was not the same sort of engagement as left wing groups and right wing groups had in the UK. But there was the big Battle of Lewisham. Can you tell us?
Oh, but Lewisham, yes, Lewisham, 1977. Yeah, man. I mean, like. Yeah, Lewisham. I mean, I think like, so Lewisham was a very multicultural area. And there was a real sort of like what the National Front sort of tactic was at the time was to go to like the most multicultural place they could and, do a show of strength through it. They had a section of the National Front called the Honor Guard. Because obviously these people are fucking weird, and like they would be all like kind of in, streetwear, but in uniform with like turn up, stay press jeans, bomber jackets, this sort of certain look, big boots, and they would go through and like there would be like increases in racial attacks in those areas after they'd done the marches. Kind of it was really kind of designed to sort of to make a to kick things off. There was the far right have always been about kind of kicking off a race war, right? So this was like kind of an attempt at that sort of thing. And Lewisham, I think, was like the moment when. So like we had a few undercover police talk about it as like kind of that's when British public order policing changed. That we started seeing the rise of like the riot cop as we know them now, these body armored kind of guys that like, you can fight a riot cop all you like, man. You ain't hurting him. Like when he's in all that gear, you ain't hurting him. But back then, you could fight a cop. You could actually fight a cop. You'd probably lose, but you could fight one. You could actually, you could have a pop, like,
you could get fist to face.
Yeah, it would be physically possible. Yeah, physically possible to knock one over. Like, yeah, for sure. So like this was kind of So yeah, like Lewisham was like the moment where like kind of anti-fascists were like, right, no, fuck this. We're like, and there was there was significant violence. Nobody was killed. There was 18 undercover officers there that day. Interestingly, we go on 2 years to oh God, I'm trying to think of the name of the location of it. Southall in 1979, where a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, Blair Peach, was beaten to death by members of the Special Patrol Group, which is the specialist unit that had been set up after Lewisham. Like, only one undercover officer admits to have been there, which is obviously a fucking lie. They were heavily infiltrating the anti-fascist movement at that time, and like, the reports we've got from that, it's about everything, right? It's about everything. It's the same as everything else. It's the detail, no detail too small, right? Everything recorded, particularly, of course, like the personal detail, the personal sort of, all the pretty girls, right? They list all the pretty girls and like kind of their the size of their chests and all that kind of stuff, But like, but by the time you've got to like the late 70s, the National Front have really been like kind of they've become like a significant threat, I think, to anybody. Like, there's numerous like kind of race attacks. There's splinter groups like Column 88, the Dalston Axe Clan, who are like going around throwing axes through the windows of like mixed race couples and stuff. And you get things like these community defense groups springing up, which are like, admittedly like kind of inspired by the left, but it's bigger than that. And I mean, this was the thing that the police really realized they couldn't deal, that this was the problem, this is why they were, maybe one of the reasons why they were so desperate for like the slightest bit of information about anybody who was vaguely connected, because, a lot of these people who are fighting the fascists back, they're not Trotskyites. They're not, they don't know what those fucking words mean. They just live here, and these are the people who are fucking making their lives misery. You know what I mean? So like, a lot of anti-fascists weren't coming from a political place, and the police were like, shit, how do we stop those ones? There was a really famous Rock Against Racism gig with like the Clash in 1978. It was in Victoria Park. It was like a really famous concert. It's in that film Rude Boy. I don't know if you know the Clash, but it's in the film Rude Boy. It's like a really famous kind of, and like it. 100,000 people turned up, right? It's like this, the undercover officers had no idea it was going to be that big. I mean, the organizers who we spoke to, they had no idea it was going to be that big either. It was like, whoa, shit, this is, it turned into a massive event. And there was from the public order unit within Special Branch, they weren't really angry with the SDS. Like, what, you didn't tell us there was going to be this many people. And there's a National Front demonstration tomorrow, and there's tens of thousands of anti-fascists in London, especially. How are we meant to guarantee the safety of the National Front tomorrow? I mean, that's an internal memo.
That's the key. You surprise the organizers, and then you can surprise the cops.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
That's what we can learn from this.
100%. Yeah. I mean, actually, it really is. It's the spontaneous stuff they can't fucking deal with.
Or just, I mean, I think that's such a fascinating point about, the, for people who don't understand the history there, but with the anti-fascist movement in Britain in the late 70s, early 80s, like being as big as it was, and really being like just about like neighborhoods and families like protecting their streets, like quite literally, and it being almost apolitical at that point, right? And that being the biggest threat to the cops, because they have no like, there's no pathway for them to get into just like literally regular working people's homes that are not politically active on that kind of like vanguard front. That's like a really important, I think an important kind of like organizing point to internalize, really.
Yeah, I think absolutely, and I think like it's that thing of like kind of if revolution means anything, it has to be like rooted in everyday life, all that shit. That's really true because. Yeah, like how do you break into family units? I mean, the police found ways. The family justice campaigns, of which we hear like the first one with the Blair Peach campaign, which is really heavily targeted, and we heard a lot about that this phase. But like in future phases, they like pretty much every single person who was killed by the police or in a racist attack, and then there was a family justice campaign about it. They made sure they infiltrated that. They put a lot of resources into those because they saw those as like kind of more dangerous than the left almost. These are like ordinary working class people organizing for themselves and they're ethnic minorities. Oh my God, fucking hell. That's like the worst thing.
1-2 punch.
They could fucking imagine. All right. For real.
Yeah, I mean that is an interesting point because like if there's anything you can learn from these inquiries and like something that I mean I myself am very intimately familiar with is that left-wing organizations often have a lot of problems. I mean everything from paranoia, which actually in this case would have been justified, but to bizarre like parliamentary maneuverings and like the psychology of being in some of these groups, I think, makes your brain a little twisted. I mean, they're talking about. I think it was Diane Langford, who was in the Women's Liberation Front, who gave evidence. Uh, there was uh, there was an SDS. I think a woman officer from the SDS joined the Women's Liberation Group and got her
Sandra,
got her ousted as the leader by leading a campaign against her.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean that's something we see a few times. Essentially, like you had this thing of like kind of these officers who were like kind of getting themselves up into power. They were doing it at the expense of other people. Like, I mean, we had a number of undercover officers going, well, I didn't do anything. I might have got elected that position, but I didn't do anything. I didn't do any work as that position. I just got the position because I was asked to and people elected me to do it, but I didn't want it and I didn't do anything. But like what you actually see is like, yeah, you went and replaced a really capable person who was really driven and would have done a really good job. And you went and sat in that position and like fucked about and like kind of denounced some people and split the group and expelled someone. And I mean, like, yeah, you didn't do much except for, make a mess. Yeah. Like you've just told on yourself.
Yeah. I mean, she gave evidence that Sandra Davies like ignored. There was like a rape allegation at one of these meetings, and she just totally shunted that aside with the intention of focusing on Langford and her partner. And just like ridiculing them and getting them out of power. And so like, I mean, these things do actually have some pretty big, I mean, even if they say like, oh, I was just sort of sat in this position on this group that would have disappeared in a few years anyways. Like, I mean, certainly that may be literally true, but there's a lot of details here that I think that are pretty important.
I mean, it's worth noting that, like, if you read the women's Liberation Front, I mean, it was a Maoist front, to be honest. But like, their campaign points, they're full of things which now you'd go like, what? Like, I mean, remember back then, like, women couldn't have their own bank accounts in Britain.
Right.
Like you could, I mean, like, rape inside marriage was only made illegal in 1990 in the UK, right? Like, there's a lot of things that are, like the rights of somebody born outside wedlock was significantly less than someone born inside wedlock. All these, so many of these things, right? Which, their campaign points were kind of pretty, like pretty reasonable. I mean, like some of them kind of are quite radical even now, but like I think we'd all probably agree with them. But like the most of it is kind of sounds like pretty middle of the road stuff. So like, like taking down those sort of groups, it's like, wow, they really were at war with certain social attitudes, It's like with the Troops Out movement and the anti-apartheid movement. These were really popular things. They had like a lot of widespread support in the country, And I mean, like, so the Troops Out movement, like, never really kind of got anywhere particularly, but like there was a lot of support for their line, this sort of like, we're not supporting Irish republicanism. We're not saying that Ireland should be reunited, but we're saying that we shouldn't have a military operation happening in Northern Ireland, and that was like quite, that opinion polling kind of put that as like kind of majority position, right? So, and like same with the anti-racism, and the anti-fascism, these were big cultural social movements, of like kind of which went beyond politics, and they were fighting against them as much as they were for like kind of little groups that were doing something specific.
What has been like the most, after this phase of the inquiry, like what has been the most surprising of the like slow drip that's come out, or even from from a procedural standpoint?
I mean, procedurally, I mean, it's been, we've definitely kind of got a sense of how this is all going to work now. Like, I mean, it's really telling, apart from Diane Langford, who forced her way in by being mentioned so much in the first phase. And she was like, hang on, like, you've named me repeatedly. I'd like demand to give evidence to this inquiry. Yeah. Everybody else, apart from like Dr. Norman Temple, who like, obviously the inquiry, like once this woman from the Maoists had like forced her way in, he was like, well, we have to get a man from the Maoists because we can't trust a woman. I mean, they're still, it's still dripping with misogyny itself. It's an establishment institution, right? So they had Dr. Norman Temple, who was like, I don't want to slag anybody off on the anti-state side, but like he was a terrible witness. Jesus wept. God, he was awful. Ed Dorian, man. Ed Dorian from the Irish Republican Socialist Front. Oh, he was a bad man. He didn't like him. He's used the entire time giving evidence to slag him off. But anyway.
He was just denouncing another guy. All right. Classic.
Yeah. He just used the like classic Maoist, man. Do you know what I mean? And like when he was asked directly about the undercover officer, he was like, "Oh, I didn't really know him." It was just like, but Ed Dorian, though. Ed Dorian, he was like Trump. Oh, he was awful. It was like, but like in terms of like kind of the line of questioning that we've seen, a lot of it's been particularly early on in the proceedings, like non-state, non-police corps participants, which is what they like to call members of the public. It's like this really long-winded name to like, you know, only like kind of establishment circles. So, well, you're not the police, you're not the state. So what do we call you? Oh, you're the non-police, non-state people. It's like, no, we're the public, mate. That's anyway. But like the question's been very hostile.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like well, we're subjects technically in Britain. We're not citizens, but like there's yeah, shit, mate. That's honestly, it's like fucking living in the fucking Middle Ages sometimes.
God damn it.
But like there was this like kind of there's this sort of like the way that it's sort of structured is very much like kind of but you were being violent, weren't you? Like you may not have been being violent, but you could see how that disorder would be distressing, don't you? I mean, what were the police meant to do? How, I mean, you know, like you may say that you were engaging with the police, but there were sections within your group that were like would cause disorder. I mean, how else were they meant to know without putting undercover officers into your group? Now, obviously, the nature of inquiries is that like you've got counsel of the inquiry, and then like all the other sort of the interested parties submit questions to them for the witnesses, right? So we're saying like, we want you to ask this. From my lawyer would be like, oh, I want these things asked, and the police would be like, I want these things asked, right? But like, the tone and the tenor of it has been very hostile and accusatory and kind of aggressive in places. And particularly in some cases, like really kind of like taking people back to incredibly traumatic events, whether that's like the first time they had sex with this guy who was undercover officer, or like when their partner was murdered by the police and made them relive that day. Which, I mean, I got to be honest, like, because I totally immersed myself in it, I got like much more emotionally like upset about that than I probably should have done. Because I just thought, fucking like, what the fuck are these people doing this for? Like, and it just shows there's a lack of respect for the like the shattered lives that they've got in front of them. At the same time, there's, you know, it's telling the only time that the chair of the inquiry, like after anybody gave evidence, he'd thank them, but the only time he ever said, "Oh, thank you for being an honest witness," was to undercover cops. Who hadn't been fucking honest by anybody's fucking metric. Like, Jesus. I mean, things definitely changed when there was the questioning of Madeleine, which was, again, very hostile, I thought. And then the next day, they had the questioning of Vince Miller, who was the undercover officer who she'd had a sexual relationship with. And he was like, I don't know how the hell he was the undercover cop, because he gave away every tell in the world of lying. He was like, you know, he was sweating profusely. He was like this on the screen, like kind of like edging out of the corner. He was playing with his neck and his forehead and like pulling on his ear and just doing every tell in the world.
Like from a TV show or something.
Pull on the ear is the most obvious one. No one even does that.
I know, right? I know. It was like a joke almost. Because what's interesting is because none of that footage, I mean, the chair can see it, I could see it, and the people in the viewing room could see it, but that no longer exists. That the audio doesn't even exist anymore. They don't keep the audio.
Huh.
So you've just got the written record of it. Yeah, so like technically this whole event, if it wasn't for COVID, it would be happening all in the same room, and there would be just the stenographer's transcript, you know, no photographs, no audio, nothing.
I see.
Because of COVID, it's been broadcast, admittedly inside a closed circuit, with certain people being allowed to hear the audio of it if they kind of put a request in. But like, yeah, when it's up and when COVID's over, there will be none of that. There'll be no broadcasting of it at all. So people have been able to follow it, a lot of it quite easily. The non-state corporate, well, I say easily. I mean, it's not. None of it's easy. It's designed to be alienating and confusing, the whole fucking process. But it is possible if you get like kind of access to the audio to kind of follow things. But like once it's in person again, unless you actually physically turn up, there's no way you could follow it. You know.
We mentioned the like lack of press coverage, and I mean, at least in, I mean, obviously in the US, there's been literally zero. That's not that surprising, but you know, the UK press hasn't been all over this stuff either. I don't even know how many. No. I mean, certainly in the States, I don't even know how many people, including like journalists, are aware of this. But it's been sort of shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I think like so we've had like there's Rob Evans at the Guardian who like has
Right.
been following this story since the very beginning, and he files stories on it as often as he can. So during the inquiry, there was a new article every day. I mean, because of the nature of the press, he's filing at like midday, early afternoon, and the inquiry's running till like 7 in the evening, and then there's another day tomorrow. So like it's kind of what he actually kind of puts into the press is kind of it's not the whole picture at all. And then the Morning Star, the People's Daily, the left-wing daily English newspaper, the only one I think in the world still.
Yeah. We've had a guy on from there.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so Bethany Riley from them, she was at the inquiry every day, and like fair play to her, she stayed there all day. And again, she had to file in the early afternoon, but she actually stayed the whole thing and kind of. I think she's got like kind of she's immersed herself in it as much as any of the activists did, and like she's filing regular reports. But like in both cases, every one of them sort of like reintroduces the topic to the reader because like. And it's such a fucking complex topic, right? It's a hard thing to kind of get across to people unless you go into massive depth. So if you look at the daily reports that we did as well, the Campaign Opposing Police Surveillance, which I'm part of, did daily reports. We're like so detailed because like nobody else is doing the detail like at all. It's just completely missing because those who are covering it. So like Dominic Cancini from the BBC and Simon Israel from Channel 4 both kind of covered it in like limited amounts, but both of them had terrible trouble with their editors getting these things. So they did like reports for the website, but it didn't get on the TV news just because they were like, oh, we kind of covered this years ago, like we don't get why it's a story now. And like partially, I think it's because we're learning how far it goes, right? Like these reports were going to the Home Secretary. These the directions for these undercover officers were coming from MI5. The security services were asking for specifics. They were asking like a lot. I was surprised how that was when actually you were saying what was surprised you most. But I think one of the things that I kind of did surprise me was I knew that like MI5 wanted the files, right? They wanted any information, so put it in box 500 as well as everything else, right? As well as our own files, we give it to MI5. But then the other way, the requests, the memos coming from MI5 going to the individual officers, going like, we want the name and addresses of everybody in this area who's involved in anything, and we want to know, like, we need this updated. I mean, so much so that undercover officers were like sending memos back, going, "This is too much work. I can't do this. I need like another 3 members of staff. I'm going to." They're asking me for way too much. So they were not doing some parts of it, but you're doing huge parts of it, huge amount of it. And it's starting to see that actually, that maybe the SDS are kind of like, they're just like foot soldiers for MI5, really. Which kind of, I'd always kind of thought, again, like kind of the MI5 were into the Soviets, Irish Republicans, shit like that. Not like, like the Women's Liberation Front.
Not domestically.
Stop the 70. Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we saw the same thing here in the 60s, I mean, up until today too, is that like our intelligence services basically a lot of the times will use local cops. I mean, killing of Fred Hampton is a great example. I mean, that was made popular, I guess, by that movie last year. But like, in a lot of different cases would definitely use local cops. I mean, either as foot soldiers to beat the shit out of somebody or kill somebody, or just to spy on people, as essentially just like a manpower problem, you don't necessarily have enough agents at the federal level to do it. You got to get some fucking cops, on the ground.
I think what's interesting too then is that it's like, I guess I always assumed, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but I always assumed it's like it's way more informal, like that kind of communication, like that it's kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like, it's like your idea about what a plainclothes thing, and maybe they meet with a guy at a thing, but it's not, a fucking memo. It's not like you're saying these boxes, get these back to me. But the kind of like chain of, I mean, it's not really chain of command, but the kind of like tree, information and kind of intelligence tree is, I mean, it's pretty shocking. I had no idea how involved MI5 was.
I mean, what's interesting, actually, at the same time as the inquiry was taking place, we also had Kate Wilson's case at the Investigative Powers Tribunal taking place just at the beginning of the inquiry. And that was looking at Mark Kennedy's deployment in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Now, the Investigative Powers Tribunal is like a really secretive court within the Home Office just for human rights stuff. And like, for years doing like legal cases against the police, it was always kind of figured that you'd never do that. But she carried on and did it. And it was at the same time as the inquiry, which was really irritating because it was really hard to follow both. And it's a really complex court, and the way they work is really complex. But we actually ended up with a lot of disclosure from that. And what we saw from that is like by the 2000s, we're talking like every 20 minutes they're talking to the handlers. Like the relaying of information, the request for information, it's not like kind of, oh, we have a weekly, like in the 70s, they're having twice weekly meetings where they're filing reports and like kind of having debriefs. But like by the 2000s, they're like every 20 minutes, text messages, phone calls, constantly in touch. And like the requests that are coming through, it was really interesting at the inquiry. We had one of the bits of evidence was from a witness Z from MI5. And I forget if it was in that or it was something that was in the Investigative Powers Tribunal pack. But this thing from like MI5 that like kind of, oh well, the problem was these were like, these were plod doing like a posh boy's job. They weren't suitably good enough at it. And like this is the thing for the security services, they're very elitist, very very elitist.
Yeah.
You ain't getting recruited unless you've gone to one of the top unis or whatever. So they have got a manpower issue, because they all want to retire young as well. So they don't. It's like there's a real shortage of like.
You got to go overthrow like the Seychelles government.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. You kind of like expected. You expect way more of them than that. So, yeah, the real manpower issues, and like if they're looking at these sort of mass movements that are happening, they have to use like local police.
A couple of things that stood out to me, too, were I mean, again, you talked about I think we talked about this in the first episode, but using the identity of dead children as their identities. A couple things about that is, one, I didn't know that they actually took that from Day of the Jackal.
Yeah, so like we kind of thought that was like kind of a joke that it would take from Day of the Jackal, because it's known as the Jackal Run within the SDF, which we'd heard from Peter Francis, who was the whistleblower who kind of came forward, who had been deployed in the 90s. He said, "Oh, we called it the Jackal Run." So we were like, "Oh, right." So was it taken Day of the Jackal? And he was like, "Well, probably not, but it was in the film, wasn't it?" But then literally we had an undercover officer, Paul Gray, who was one of the few we didn't see. And I was like, why can't we see we saw the video of them in the viewing room, but him, we didn't see his face. And I was like, why don't we see his face? And then I heard his voice and it all made sense. He was so posh. It's like, oh, he's posh enough that the inquiry have given him even more anonymity than the rest. So, but anyway, so he said, oh yeah, so, why did you do this thing? And he said, oh, we'd all seen Day of the Jackal in 1972. And so by like 1973, we were doing jackal runs to get our identities. And it was like, what, you've like, really? And he was like, well, yeah. And I mean, like, so there was other officers were like, oh no, it wouldn't have been that. But he was he was someone who was, though he was a field officer, was very friendly and close to the other managers, because he was obvious. And like he talked about like kind of when he talked to your managers, like mostly on the squash court. This was somebody who was like very much of the same social class as his superiors. Yeah. And he was adamant. No, it's from Day of the Jackal. Like, I mean, literally, that's fucking. And what they would do is go to Somerset House, which is the birth records. They'd find someone who died when they were really young, take that identity. Interestingly, Rick Gibson, who was one of those officers who had numerous sexual relationships, he did that, and he tried to infiltrate a group called Big Flame, who were like kind of a libertarian socialist group. Really cool. I mean, like they're old fucking zines, man. They're really cool. Like the aesthetic of them, the kind of topics that, one of the more interesting groups in like British left-wing history. But like he tried to infiltrate them, and they checked him out, and they went and looked him up, and they found his birth certificate, and then they looked up the death certificates, and they found his death certificate. And that's like in the 70s. Which, like when we first learned that a group in the 70s had found that one of these officers existed, we were like, well, why didn't they make a fuss? But actually, they were fucking terrified, is why. They were fucking terrified. They put all their information, they confronted him with it. Like, first they tried to get rid of him without like telling him what they knew, but he just wouldn't fuck off. And he kept saying, oh, just ring this person. This is my brother. He works here. And they kept like, no, this is not coming up. They showed him the death certificate. Then he was like, no, ring this person. Next day, didn't show up. Went around his house, cleared out house, never saw it again. And it was like, oh, so you knew this had happened. Why did you continue to keep using dead children's identities? And Paul Gray went, well, we all knew that Rick Gibson had been found out because of all his dalliances, not because of his Jews. Like, if he hadn't have had all those dalliances, they wouldn't have looked him up.
Oh,
so, so how did you know that? So was it common knowledge within the SDS that these officers were having sex with their targets? And he went, well, that was before I joined the SDS. I knew that. So we had officers saying that the SDS was secret within Special Branch. And then we got a Special Branch officer going like, well, I knew all the gossip about the unit before I even joined. that actually the gossip about that kind of stuff. Because I mean, one of the undercover officers who spoke was Graham Coates, who infiltrated anarchist groups, and I mean, he's obviously got like a female family member who's like pulled him up and gone, look, this is fucking unacceptable. Because he actually went, he was quite honest. I think he was honest. It's hard to imagine these people being honest about the misogynist attitudes that existed with the SDS at the time. There was a lot of like, good on you. I bet he made a bite the blanket last night. Like lots of talk about the sexual conquest that various undercover officers had. And like kind of really like kind of, shined a light on like kind of, which all the others was like, no, not at all, not at all. But then they ended up telling on themselves like by just any bits of detail, which, I mean, he also claimed that there was no racism within the group, which was like ridiculous when you saw the reports, because in the reports you'd get like, people described by racial slurs, use of the N-word, all that kind of stuff, just in like descriptive language, not having a go at them, just going, this was a, like that kind of language. And he said, oh, no, we weren't using racist language like in the safe house chatting. But we were in our official reports that were being filed to MI5. So, like, but the use of the dead children's identities, like, even though it was blown open early on, they just kept doing it anyway. And like, it was put to them, like, do you not feel that it was like bad for the families? A lot of these children had died in really traumatic ways. But I should point out as well, it's not just that they stole the identity as in the name. They like went to visit where the person family were from.
Yeah.
They staked out the parents. They like worked out where they would have gone to school, and then they kind of constructed the fake life that this child would have had and made that their life, which obviously is incredibly fucking disturbing for the parents of those children, because it's like, of course, they've always fucking wondered, oh, they would have gone to that school, or maybe they'd have gone and worked there. The local factory, they may have done that. And these undercover officers had like thought that up and then like told people that's what their life was, Yeah, which is like, but they were, even now, like it was put to them, like, well, what do you think of it now? Like in retrospect, it's like, well, I didn't think of it at all, but now what do you think of it? Well, I'll tell you this: I don't agree with those families going to the media and making a fuss. It's not right.
Oh my God.
What, you're annoyed with the families for being upset? You fucker, you fucking scumbag.
Well, that's the thing that really sort of most strikes me on like a sort of second level about these guys. And you mentioned this earlier, sort of their use of like trauma as a weapon. I mean, you alluded to that earlier when we were talking about like, like when these guys would try to like not only get in these groups, but seduce women in these groups, sometimes for political purposes, sometimes for quote political purposes. They would always have, I mean, all these guys would have some really traumatic backstory, right? Like, I mean, almost always. And that would get them in. And in this, you stealing like a dead child's identity, it's sort of another use of this like really traumatic thing as a weapon, essentially, against people who a lot of the times, I mean, I looked at some of these goddamn reports these guys were filing. They're talking about fucking going, like they're writing up full reports about meetings where people were printing off flyers. And like meetings where literally, I mean, anybody here has been to a political meeting where nothing gets done, which is, I would say, the vast majority 99%. Of political meetings. I mean, imagine somebody writing up an entire thing about the granular detail about exactly what went on there, who chaired it, who said what, all this kind of stuff. I mean, the actual reports, you can read a lot of these. I mean, they're almost, it's stupefying how useless they are. And then, like we talked about last episode, you realize that actually the point is not what you think it is. It's not because they thought the SWP was going to take over the UK. It's the point was to basically a means of social control.
Well, it's like the unit itself is the point. You know what I mean? It's like even the like mundane infiltration is what gives cause itself to the unit existing in the first place. It's absolutely, it's a total mindfuck, I think. Just, this is something we talked about again on the, in our interviews with scholars researching the FBI's use of these kind of similar tactics in the US. But it's like, there is this idea that it's like, the cops infiltrating, the feds infiltrating at a level in order to stop. It must mean that something was so powerful they had to intervene. And it's like, no. Like, this is just like the kind of mundane aspects of like the way the police state works itself, you know?
I mean, I would say on that. I mean, like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And if you look at like the SDS annual reports, which are like basically justifying the next round of funding,
Yeah, of course.
and like they'll say things like, "Oh, it's been a very quiet year, but like the left is just waiting for an issue they can jump on to make a fuss." So we still need the unit because even though not much has happened recently, like soon, boy, they'll be up to something. Do you what they'll use some death to stir up anti-police sentiment. This was like. Yeah, they're justifying their existence, right? But also, like, well, and this has come across very strongly in the way the inquiry's gone about it. The dangerous thing isn't the actions; it's the ideas.
Yeah.
Is that's what they're really like kind of like upset about. They're really like kind of concerned about is these ideas that like women should have full rights and like that maybe ethnic minorities shouldn't have to worry about being attacked in the street. These sort of like these radical ideas which totally go against the vested interests of the establishment of the state in the UK. And like it's these kind of like we've seen a lot of the inquiry, like with the questions, like, well, what doesn't your ideology eventually lead to the overthrow of the state? And it's like, well, yeah, but like nobody's doing that. We're are actually engaged with selling newspapers, building a movement. And it's like, yeah, but one day if you build a big enough movement, you could have overthrown the state. It's like, well, I guess, man, fucking hell. Yeah. And like that kind of thing of like when like I'm always really wary of this thing of like kind of and they were just messing around and there was no point of it. It's like there was a point. They were holding back social progress. They were holding back like progressive attitudes. They were like kind of I mean I don't know if it would have made any difference for when like apartheid fell, but I'm sure that like Britain's involvement and Britain's support of like the apartheid regime in South Africa would have ebbed away a lot earlier if the progressive grassroots social movements have been allowed to blossom in the way that like kind of public opinion suggested they would have done, and like it's that kind of thing which was really there, that's what they were about, I think.
Well, before we wrap up, what are the next steps in this? We mentioned that it's getting pushed out like a year, 2 years. There's never going to be an end to this, is there?
It never ends, and it will never end. I mean, like imminent climate change will come and fucking stop us from playing around these silly games. But like as it goes, like this will continue for a long time. I mean, part of the thing is every phase of the inquiry is just a massive info dump. I mean, like when you're sat in the inquiry, you're getting like this live
classic
this live feed with people. Yeah. At the same time as we're hearing from somebody, they're publishing like 10,000 pages of files about it, which are like those awful scans of fucking bad copies of duplicates from the 1970s that is really hard to read. But like, if anybody fancies themselves, if any of your listeners fancy themselves as a bit of a researcher or an investigator, I don't know if anybody listening to the show might be like that.
Yeah.
Like, there is so much information on the UPCI website. Like, there is so much like the Undercover Research Group, which I'm involved with, like we do an immense amount of work sifting through that, finding like stories. But what's really like the hardest thing is taking like what we've just found out and matching it with what's always been in the public domain, things that have like in old like kind of left-wing publications, and like kind of seeing significance. Because sometimes the significance only comes into view when you realize the stuff that's not in the reports, the things that was happening at the same time.
Absolutely.
And like there's so much of that. There's such a huge amount of that like that's going to keep us busy until the next phase of the inquiry, and we won't have finished it by the time, So like I've started doing this podcast with some of the other people who are affected, and we're just kind of going through like various strands, like picking them up and like trying to pull through them. But like, we could be doing it forever and we still won't have finished. Like there's so much that to do that I think like that's the kind of, that's what's going to keep us busy until the next time the inquiry sits again,
Yeah, that's a good little call out to the little gumshoes listening, that there is a lot of research to do, and the our unfortunate blue checky journalists listening, that there's a massive story here, and a lot of this can connect to also what we've seen in the US. It's funny, Brace and I were talking like before we started recording, like we cannot imagine anyone in Congress, including the like left-wing members, ever calling for an investigation into like COINTELPRO. Like it just is. It's like outside. I wouldn't even. I don't even think that people would think to even ask for that. Like that's how low the horizon, the like imaginative horizon is, when it comes to thinking about, the way the police and the feds operate.
I would say the majority of people in Parliament in the UK who've like kind of made a fuss about this have been personally targeted. The fact that Theresa May called for public inquiry still shocks me. I think that's the most shocking
Very
thing.
interesting. Yeah. She was always kind of a wild bird, though.
I don't know, man. I don't know what it is. I mean, I think it was just austerity. Is he wanted to cut the police.
Yeah.
Defund the police,
Which
man.
is so
Go
funny.
on, Theresa.
Critical support.
But like, for like, yeah, right, yeah, for good neoliberal reasons, they're just too expensive. But like that. Yeah, it was such a weird thing they did that. But like, otherwise, we were talking like people like Peter Hain or Jeremy Corbyn or Diane Abbott or John McDonnell, they've all been targeted themselves. They've all got registry files. That's why
Absolutely.
they're bothered. I mean, not, I don't disparage them having like obviously good reasons why. But to be honest, if you actually cared about this stuff, of course there's a file on you. Of course there is, One of the things that's been really irritating actually is that there's this thing of like kind of people go in like, oh, we've known this for years. And it's like, no, we haven't. We've guessed this for years. Now we've got it in black and white. It's like so much of what we're finding out is like, yeah, well, we kind of guessed that was the case, but we didn't have any actual fucking solid gold proof of it, right? We just had like kind of a thought that this was like, what was going on. And a lot of our prejudices and like kind of theories have been like proved right, but more often than not, they've gone way further. Like, the infiltration is much deeper. The infiltration's much more, mundane as well. Like you say, that like there's so much about like childcare, like so many spying on so many children. So much like
an insane amount about childcare.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. But I think there's partially it was like kind of they were disgusted. There were men were doing it.
No, I think that point you bring up about the kind of attitude of like, well, we've always known this, whatever. It's like so important because it is this kind of like, it's this hurdle that I think it's like a cynical hurdle that needs to be overcome. That there is a way of like foreclosing not just like curiosity, but also like a reckoning of how state power operates and what that means politically. And it's like, we get this all the time about stuff we cover on the podcast from, the 60s or the 70s. People be like, oh, who cares? Yeah, we know that. Yeah, who knew? It's like, but you didn't. And you don't. And we actually still don't. I mean, that's the whole point is that, like you say, this inquiry is completely and totally, manipulate, what we call like a limited hangout, right? This is how these things operate. You get a little bit of information, just enough, or you get like 10,000 pages, so much that you can't go through it. All of these kind of roadblocks they put up. And they do that as a way of controlling what's out there and continuing these programs. So like, we actually don't know, I don't know, we don't know a majority of the scope of these things. And it is important to come to terms with, least of which is just for justice for the victims, right? Let alone the political reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, like, I don't think, like, like, as much as one of the most important parts of, like, kind of bringing all this stuff was, like, kind of grabbing the narrative. Yeah, trying to control some of the narrative of people whose, like, lives have been controlled. And, like, a lot of people have really been, like, we don't want to be considered victims, man. And, like, I mean, and that's always been my politics. I'm not a victim. I'm a combatant. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was targeted, but, like, I'm trying to target them back, right? And that's, like, I think it's important to, like, kind of be on the front foot with that shit, It's like...
No, right on, yeah.
But one of the things that's really annoyed me, another thing that's really annoyed me, no, I've started thinking about things that annoyed me about this process, is that like so many of the cops have had so much anonymity, right? They've had so much like, you can't see their faces, you don't know their names, we're referring to them by cipher, no real names have been given out, even some cover names have been kept secret. Some officers don't even have a cipher. They're so secret that all we've got is a gist about them, which purposefully like mixes together their evidence with the evidence of others. Now, interestingly, one of those was the only officer who was there when Blair Peach died, though he claims he left before that incident happened. I mean, just if people aren't familiar with the death of Blair Peach was beaten to death by 6 members of the special patrol group who were using homemade weapons. And when their houses were searched, they found they had Nazi memorabilia on display in their homes, right? So, like, pretty fucking serious fuckers. Like it took 30 years for the Cass report, which like looked into what happened, to be released to the family. That named essentially the officers who would have been the ones guilty of it, and particularly a guy called Alan Murray, Inspector Alan Murray, who would have been the first out the van, who was using a homemade kosh, which kind of fits with the blow to the head, which murdered Blair Peach.
What's a kosh?
So a kosh is like a club, like a homemade club, but like
Okay. Yeah.
like an improvised club. Which he was using instead of a truncheon because it was more, and like some of the stuff they had looked fucking medieval that they were going around smashing, kicking people's heads in with. Surprised nobody didn't die earlier, to be perfectly frank. But like that guy's alive and well. He's a doctor. He works. He was at University of Sheffield. Like nothing's happened to him, right? Like we know he beat someone to death on a demonstration, right? Like one of the most caused celeb like issues on the left, the death of Blair Peach. There's been songs about it. There've been films. There's been everything about it, right? Like, we know who he is. We know his name. Like, he appears on fucking the news sometimes talking about unrelated issues. Like, nobody's gone around and fucking stoved his face in, have they? You know what I mean? Like, the idea that these undercover cops who infiltrated these other groups are somehow in danger because if they were named now is just fucking laughable. Yet they've got so much secrecy which is not afforded to like normal cops who infiltrate like, you know, proper crime. Like, you know, people like Neil Woods or you know, people like that who've like been undercover in like kind of, you know, drug gangs and stuff, and then they write books and go on bloody TV. They put away thousands of people in prison. Like if anybody was going to shoot somebody for freaking, like Neil Woods would be dead, but he's not. You can hear him on like 100 podcasts every week. You know, I mean, kind of interesting guy really for a cop, but like, you know, there's this thing of like kind of they need so much secrecy because they're in so much danger, which is just such bullshit, man. It's such bullshit. And it seems like you know, when you've got people like who they're not even knowing their cipher, they haven't got a cipher for them. You can't even talk about them. It's like really hard to talk about people you haven't even got a cipher. So like,
yeah, totally.
It's just so, you know, like it's like it really is grasping at fucking steam, you know. And like, so you kind of get the impression that you've got some sacrificial lambs going out there, but like the people who did like the worst things, the people who've got the most secrets. And like anytime like Blair Peach was brought up, like literally every cop some of them have been like quite open about certain things, and then Blair Peach comes up and it's just like they've made a vow of silence on that shit. All of them made a vow of silence on that shit.
Yeah.
Was it discussed? No, never discussed. Nothing ever about Blair Peach ever, not once, not never, not none. Like, do you ever talk about it now when reunions? No one's ever mentioned it. We've never mentioned it ever. It's like fucking.
Yeah, you want to see
bastards.
great examples of solidarity. Check out the cops. You know what I mean?
Right, man. Fucking hell. Like, if we had that, man, we'd never lose a fucking strike. You know what I mean? Jesus.
Well, Tom, it has been, again, despite the subject matter, an absolute pleasure having you on.
Always,
and I'm thrilled that Tom now has, I feel it's fucked up that you have a podcast because doing a podcast is a low, rotten, dirty thing for a human being to do. But for my own personal reasons, I'm glad you had one. And to remind our fucking listeners, it is called Spycops Info Podcast. You can find that like on iTunes and everything like that. I've been listening to it.
Yeah, we'll link to it
everywhere,
man.
And also check him out
nice
at Tom B Fowler on Twitter. And yeah, Tom, a pleasure. We have I want to make this clear. Tom agreed to come on the show despite the fact that pubs are reopening tonight.
Yeah, well, they reopened like on the weekend indoors, but all my mates are going to the pub tonight, and like they've been there for the last like 3 hours. But you know, I did this anyway
shit, so
because
you gotta go down
this is true dedication.
You know, are indoor bars open indoors in LA now? Are you like can you go indoors at the pub?
You can, yeah.
Kind of, but a lot of places.
Yeah, isn't that
still,
like?
Yeah. A lot of places still like they won't let.
Yeah,
it's all different. Like all the cities are all different here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, so it's there's a lot of places you can go here where it's kind of shit. You've got to sit in a booth, like away from you don't actually see people. But like, there's some places, you know, like if you know the right places, man. You know,
a picture of Farage out there.
Oh, fucking hell, man! How the fuck, man? Like King Grifter, eh? What a
Grifter god!
You know I mean? Like,
he's on Cameo. Yeah,
of course he is.
You could pay him like whatever $200 to like say, like,
oh my
Susie,
god,
I love you, or something like that. Like he will do like a personal message for you.
And loads of people will do that. They'll be ironically doing it. Yeah, it's not like kind of they.
I know it's like a funny idea until you realize you're literally giving him money.
Exactly. Like,
yeah. Don't do that, kids. Say no to fucking Farage cameos. Take one thing away from this episode: don't get a cameo of fucking Nigel Farage.
Yeah. No UKIP cameos, please.
For real.
Well, I feel better about the cops.
Me too. You know what? They're just regular guys like you and me who leave their wives for 5 years, insinuate themselves into the lives of people who are trying to campaign against apartheid, have sex with them, lie to them, get them kicked out of their groups, and then presumably there's some sort of payoff personally for these people in the end. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're like that, except we don't do any of that. We just have a podcast.
Yeah. Well, I am paid by the UK government, but that's to spread goodwill abroad. I'm a goodwill ambassador.
You're one of the
them.
5 guys.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that being said, my name. You know what? Lot of tossers in this fucking dungeon.
Oh my god.
What? Me name Brace.
I'm Liz. We are, of course, joined by our producer, Young Chomsky, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Infiltration.